Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I know we're running a few minutes behind because of the keynote, but hopefully you guys all appreciated the keynote this morning. How many guys were there at the keynote? Everybody? Okay, wonderful. All right, so my name is Manoj Suvarna. I'm Managing Director at Deloitte, primarily focused on the AI and data practice. And what I wanted to touch base with you guys today for the next 18 odd minutes is primarily walking you through how do you harness the data that you have, leveraging GenAI and the capabilities of both Databricks and a company called Dataiku. But before I start, just a quick show of hands. I'm going to ask two questions. Number one, how many of you guys in the audience are data scientists or data engineers? All right, a couple, yeah, about 40%, all right. Question number two, how many of you guys are currently either piloting or in production for GenAI? Okay, about 25%. Okay, good to know. I needed to build that context because as we are looking at, as we're talking to clients in terms of what are they experiencing today as they bring in new capabilities, new data, and build these models, some of the rudimentary challenges still remain the same. The complexity of the data, the fact that there are shadow projects or shadow IT initiatives that are happening in an organization, the fact that there is no governance in place, right, that brings us all together. The fact that many of them do not, see their pilots into production. Or even when you look at the complexity and the costs associated with managing all these multiple environments, right? Hopefully, some of these should resonate with you as well, because this is essentially what our clients are telling us. Now, when you think about, bringing all of this together and from an enterprise perspective, what you really need to look at is how do we scale this, right? The reason why I asked the initial question about data scientist, data analyst versus a business analyst, the biggest challenge that a lot of organizations face is that when you do model training, model development, and then the model rollouts, majority of them are limited by the number of data scientists or data engineers that are in the organization. The traditional business analysts or the data analysts still have a long learning curve when it comes to new tool sets, right? Think about doing things in SQL or Python code. How do you then get to an environment which is much more democratized to the broader population? Now, I'll put this in context. The 40%, 35 to 40% of you that raise your hands about being a data scientist or data engineer, you're falling in the population of 1 million globally, right? That is the number of data scientists and data engineers that are last known. There's about 1 billion white-collared workers around the world, right? Now, there's about 50 million of them, or roughly thereof, in that order of magnitude, that are what we call as a domain expert. Think of you guys, as business analysts for supply chain, for marketing, for manufacturing environments, for finance, right? You need a tool set that you are capable of interacting with that is much more user-friendly, that is also a point and click, and with very limited code ability. Now, how do you introduce a tool like that and then alongside work with your partners who are the data scientists and the data engineers that are now going in and building new models, but then essentially pushing it out into production, right? So there are challenges of how these two personas interact. And that is essentially where Dataiku shines in. By the way, but just show of hands, how many of you guys have heard or are aware of Dataiku? Oh, quite a few. That's great. Excellent. Well, I don't need to tell you what the company is all about. But at a very high level, for those who aren't aware of Dataiku, think of it as a workbench. It's an analytic workbench that you bring in to address the needs of different personas, right? On one hand, you have the data scientists, the data engineers, some of you are here in the audience, who can run Python code, write SQL, and then build the models and design them as you please. On the other hand, you have the business analysts and the data analysts who don't understand code, but at the same time need to generate and build these models. And so what you need to do is have a platform that is much more uniform, that can then also be supported by your enterprise, right? Because this is not a project that you're doing underneath your desk or in your department. This is an enterprise-wide rollout. And this is one of the reasons why companies struggle with when they do some of these pilot models or pilot AI projects, 85% of them don't go into production because we don't have a standard tool set, right? That is governed by the enterprise, that is enabled and ready to scale across the enterprise. And so that's essentially where bringing people, data, technology all closer is essentially what Dataiku is doing. So when you think about in a Databricks environment, right? I'm assuming you're here at the Databricks conference. Most of you, if not all of you, are Databricks users. The question is then, why bring in Dataiku and what help does it serve? The challenge, as I mentioned, is you have these multiple personas in the organization, and depending on where you sit in the organization or what your background is, your skill set is, you're going to build models built on the same Delta Lakehouse, right? That's essentially what is there at the Databricks layer. Now, on top of that, there are capabilities for runtime as well as the applications and building models, including what was announced this morning about the democratization of AI. So if you think at the next two layers, that is essentially the intersection of where a data scientist and a business analyst can talk to each other using the same layers, right? Using this tool set, which is more of an analytics workbench. And I'll explain to you here with the reference architecture of how these work. But the net of it is you could have both, right? Because what you're essentially driving is an environment where you're catering to the needs of these multiple personas all within the same organization. And then I think it's even beyond the enablement, it's the capability to drive the interaction. And it's also the capability to do the governance and the orchestration around it. This is a schematic of what a Databricks plus a Dataiku environment looks like. So everybody heard about the Unity catalog. Obviously there's much more emphasis and engineering support built into that. But at the same time, as you extend that to a business analyst or a data analyst environment, what they're looking for is essentially bringing this all together in a simple to use drag and drop format. What you're seeing here is a bunch of architectures that are melded together, bringing in the database environment as well as the recipes that connect the two. And if I can point my pointer here, I don't think the laser works here, but essentially if you look at all the orange and the green bars, right, the boxes and triangle, those are recipes that are all created. And all of this visualization, what you're seeing is essentially in a Dataiku UI, right? That is essentially what a business analyst or a data science user will see. And so how do you then bring in the capability, the powerful capability of compute and storage that exists in Databricks, combine that with the analytics capabilities that exist both in Databricks and Dataiku, and then bring it into a UI interface that can be accessible by all, right? That's essentially what this schematic is showing. There are a couple of blogs that are listed here. When you go online, you'll be able to see the details on the blogs on why both of these coexist in a client environment. Now, in addition to the base capabilities of the data science on top of database, there's also other capabilities around the interoperability, right? Chances are that you're in a multi-cloud environment. Chances are that you have a bunch of different tool sets where you're bringing in data catalog and data lineage, right? There are capabilities around storage and multiple data storage formats. The capabilities around ML flow that you want to have the interaction with. And that is essentially what the culmination of this tool set allows you to do, which is have that interoperability or have that agency in order to continue building on what you're trying to do at the end of the day. It's all about driving insights from the data that you have in a much faster fashion to the personas that you're primarily catering to. This is an example of an FSI client that we worked with recently where we have integrated, so the challenge that the client was having is there were multiple different data platforms and they also wanted to appeal to their business users, right? And so they standardize on both Databricks as well as Dataiku. And so what you're seeing here is a combination of the user interface that I mentioned earlier. A lot of that is happening inside Dataiku with the data governance as well as the orchestration part. But in addition to that, it's all building on top of the Databricks layer, right? I think, yeah, if you can see the color coding, I know the the closed captioning is down there at the bottom. But if you see the color coding, essentially there are three components of it. One is the one which is in red. It's primarily the Java-based database connectors, right? These are going directly into the database, pulling in all the functions inside the database, right? No data is leaving out of that Databricks environment. The next one, which is in blue, is essentially all the PySpark components that are connecting to that, right? So if you're writing in Python code or PySpark, that is essentially the components that tie into on top of Databricks. And then the last one is more of the Dataiku compute models. These are models that can be created in Dataiku and pushed into Databricks, or they can be pulled in from Databricks into a Dataiku environment. And so essentially, this is a good capability that you can bring in the advantages of both Databricks as well as Dataiku, and again, suiting to the personality of that organization, right? So the IT team standardized on this because they looked at it where they have a group of data scientists and data engineers, but they have hundreds, perhaps even thousands of business analysts and data users, right, that they want to expand this to. And so this allows them to provide a standardized bench that can support all of these multiple use cases. Oops, jumped ahead. Okay, all right. We talked about GenAI earlier. I know 25% of you guys raised your hands about doing some GenAI project. I'm envisioning that when it comes to GenAI, there is no single model. By the way, I'm just going to ask another question about the number of models, both public and private, that exist today. Anybody thinks there's about 50 models today? 50 or less? No, okay. 100 or less? 150 or less? 1, 2, okay. Roughly about, the last time this statistic was done was about maybe 6 months ago or 7 months ago. It was 149 models, right? A lot has changed in the last 6 to 9 months. And I bet you, if you take a stack of it, it's probably about almost 2x of what is out there, right? The models are continuing to be built, and now there are more private models being created specifically by organizations themselves, right, for clients to use themselves. So the point that I was trying to make is Dataiku has introduced this thing called an LLM mesh, large language model mesh. Think of it as an orchestration and a governance layer that sits on top of the multiple different compute architectures, data architectures, as well as the models that have out there, right? Different models come up with different parameters and use cases. And so it's a choice for you as a client because you might be using, let's say if you're in finance, maybe for your credit and loan, you're using one model. For your mortgages, you're using a different model, right? So chances are that you're mixing in, playing around with these models, but you need to be able to govern and orchestrate between these models. Even the same with some of the public and public as well as the vector store models, right? How do you orchestrate this? How do you manage your cost environment? How do you manage the governance around it? That is essentially a tool set like Dataiku that can wrap around it and bring you that visibility, that monitoring, that capability that sits on top of it. Again, agnostic of the models, agnostic of the cloud environment, agnostic of the architecture, right? So that is an added benefit, I would say, which was recently announced, and it's now in GA, that Dataiku is bringing to the market. And then going back to the schematic of how this would look like, this is essentially what the UI looks like, right? In terms of previously we had the capability of bringing the Dataiku component in analytics as well as the Databricks store, but then now adding the LLM mesh, and in this case, it's leveraging Dataiku Mosaic ML, right? So that's the model that it's pulling in from, and then being able to interact with it and have the visual representation of what this whole schematic looks like. This is essentially what is capable of supporting a business user, right? Versus somebody who's a data scientist or data engineer who wants to look at the hard code. Now, the capability of the tool is you can switch back, right? Some of these recipes, you can actually double click on them. You can go into the code and actually do the Python or SQL coding that you need to. But it's a flexibility of the tool set that allows you to do this. All right, and I think I'm almost coming up on time. So just to kind of bring this all together, right? So the question is, why Deloitte? Why Deloitte plus Databricks plus Dataiku? when you think about the data management platform, we all know that without any data or without good data, there is no AI, right? So you need to have a good, strong foundational platform. And one of the best platforms out there today is Databricks, right? We're bringing in the capabilities of the Delta Lake as well as the open source format. On the other hand, you need a tool set that appeals to a broad set of users, right? Remember the 1 million to 50 million? That's a large scale. When you scale across your enterprise and you want every one of your business users to be AI fluent and to be AI ready, they need a tool like this in order to be able to scale. And so that's essentially where you have an analytics workbench and the capability of this tool giving you the governance as well as the orchestration, bringing it all together. That's essentially where Dataiku shines. Deloitte, as you know, from a consulting and an advisory perspective, we advise our clients across various domains, across various architectures, and bringing the complexity and taking the confusion out of these environments and having a universal solution that is more appealing to your business, to your domain, and to your use case, right? Our goal collectively here is how do we take 85% of you that are not in production from an AI or a GenAI perspective to rapidly accelerate, because the reality is that every one of your competitors is out there playing around with it, piloting it, even going into production, right? How do you further differentiate yourself and bringing this tool set all together and then taking advantage of it? And then, the other thing to mention is both Databricks as well as Dataiku have been recognized as partners, winning awards. Dataiku was the AI Partner of the Year award last year. Deloitte is a Global GSI Partner of the Year award with Dataiku as well as with Databricks. So clearly the benefit that we can bring to you as a client to help you accelerate your journey with AI and GenAI. And so lastly, I would leave you with this, which is, yes, so some of the announcements that you saw this morning, obviously you can do a lot of these things in Databricks, but the key is how do you scale this across the enterprise? How do you drive this natively so that you can have productivity improvements, not only in terms of the data analytics part, but also the collaboration, right, across your enterprise? How do you drive that? And then last but not the least, the governance piece, which is absolutely becoming front and center to a lot of the organizations as they expand it. Just in a call this morning with the C-suite, and we were getting ready to present to their board, and while the whole presentation was all about digital strategy, the number one requirement that the chairman had was, where is AI in it? And also, by the way, what are we doing about governance, right? Because these are the questions that the boards are asking. And so this becomes absolutely critical as you expand your use cases into production and expand it into across the enterprise, because those governance mandates, while there are no formal mandates that have come down, they're still work in progress. But the reality is that your stakeholders, your board members are going to ask you those questions. And so highly critical that you take that into consideration. With that, I think I'm almost out of time. Feel free to take a snapshot of the QR code. You'll get more information about the overall alliance that we have and the partnership. And there are some white papers that we have published out there for your reference. But thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I'll be around here. If you have any questions, feel free to stop by. Thank you.